Great. We can do a lot of editing out, but Charles, thank you for joining us. I actually found your organization just by doing a simple Google search.
Oh,
And, I bought a home in Portland and it was extremely moldy. And I kind of wish I had found you guys before I found the fogger that
mhm.
ruined our house and made it unlivable for me. But so what we're going to do here is it's just going to be an organic conversation for an hour. I'm going to just introduce you and provide a little background that I received from the internet from your website. So I'll go ahead and just say that. You can let me know if there's anything you want me to cut out. And then we'll just get started about, discussing your organization, what you guys do, and how you're serving the community. How's that sound?
That sounds great.
Perfect. Hello, everyone. I'm Alicia Swami. I'm here with Keely Severson. Eric Johnson is out, and we are exposing mold. We have Charles Lewis with us from Nonprofit Home Inspections. Charles is an Oregon and Washington certified home inspector and a licensed general contractor with 15 years of experience. Because of his construction experiences, Charles has a firm understanding of modern building science and is able to give comprehensive experience-based home inspection reports that are easy to understand. I actually went ahead and watched the video on some of your reports, and they're just extremely comprehensive and amazing. So whoever designed that, kudos to them.
Thank you.
Charles decided to become a licensed home inspector in order to protect families from unknown hazards in the home. When he was growing up, his single mom purchased a fixer-upper that needed a lot of work. Raising 6 kids, mostly by herself, working as a waitress, Charles's mother wasn't able to afford a proper home inspection. Years later, she was diagnosed with mesothelioma because of exposure to asbestos. And within about a month of being diagnosed, she passed away from an easily preventable hazard. Charles, I'm so sorry to hear that. So not wanting other families to go through similar ordeals, he created a nonprofit home inspections, an organization that elevates the level of home inspections by training better home inspectors and by making home inspections available to everyone in the community. Please, Charles, let us know, what is nonprofit home inspections and how are you doing all this? This is just so amazing to me. My mind is blown that you are providing home inspections on a sliding scale for people who possibly can't afford it.
Yes, and thank you very much for having me. I appreciate the opportunity. As you mentioned, we are a nonprofit 501c3 organization, and our big goal is to make home inspections accessible for everybody. And as a home inspection can really help identify some defects in a home that could not only be physically debilitating, but also financially debilitating. So we want to make sure that everybody has the opportunity to get a home inspection. Was based on personal experience and something easily preventable tragedy there, with my mother being exposed to asbestos. And so we are trying to make the home inspections available to everybody regardless of income. And then we also have a state licensed trade school in both Oregon and Washington where we train people to become better home inspectors. And it's been tremendously successful. The bar for being a home inspector is kind of low in both states, and there are certain things you don't have to do as a home inspector. We do try our best to give our clients as much information as possible about defects that we would see in the home, and we try to impart that on our students as well.
Yeah, as I was going through your sample inspection on YouTube, I was just like, wow, this is extremely comprehensive. And, we cater to the mold population. So we're really interested in that portion. You guys are actually collecting data samples and you're sending it out to the lab. I remember when I purchased my home in Oregon, the inspector never did that. It was just like, oh, there's some mold here. And it was just a kind of a call out from a visual that he did, but you guys are actually sending stuff out, sampling and ensuring, okay, is this the bad mold or is this just the common mold?
Yeah, and we can take those samples. We don't necessarily do it with every single inspection. It's just what the client would want to do. And one thing about home inspections in both Oregon and Washington, and it's great that your home inspector at least mentioned, that there were visual indications of it, but actually per state law, mold is outside the scope of a home inspection, which is very interesting. But I think the reason being that a lot of mold can be hidden. You can't see it. And per state law, a home inspection is what you can see, what you can visually see. And some inspectors, don't even call out the visual indications of mold, which I think is not a good thing for sure. But the state does explicitly say mold is something that home inspectors don't do. So it's good that your inspector at least pointed it out visually. The next step up is to be able to take samples, to be able to tell the client, hey, this is the bad stuff, or this is, mold that you would commonly see in the Pacific Northwest, and what are the levels, the concentrations, because as you know, mold spores are everywhere, but as you get more and more concentrations of it, then you can have the debilitating health impacts. And we do offer the mold testing, and if in conjunction with a home inspection. We don't do the testing just on its own, because we really feel that it's one thing to test a splotch of suspected mold, and then yes, it's mold. It's another thing to say what caused it, because it's going to be moisture that caused it. Is it bad siding? Is it the roofing? Is it too much humidity in the home? There's tons and tons of reasons. So that's why we only do the mold sampling in conjunction with a home inspection, because it's so much more valuable to know why there may be mold present, because it's all about excess moisture.
Yeah. And when you guys refer to the bad stuff, the toxic black mold, what are you guys referring to in terms of like what strains?
So I'm not an expert on mold, but it's the stocky, uh, I'm going to mispronounce it, this stocky boris, or is my understanding, is the bad stuff. We take the samples, and all our inspectors are certified for sampling. Then we send it off to a certified lab, and they give the report. And one thing that's really neat about the report as well is it talks about the different types of mold that are found, but then also gives very detailed information about, is it the bad stuff that I can't pronounce, or is it, this mold that's caused by decaying wood, which is very interesting, because, you can see like a recently flipped house where everything appears to be, nice and new paint everywhere and new flooring. But sometimes we get back the mold samples, and there's a particular type of mold that is from decayed wood. And it's like, there's some dry rot in the walls. Again, we can't see it because it may be covered with a fresh sheet of drywall and paint, but by doing the mold sampling, you can find out things that you wouldn't be able to see, like, hey, there's dry rot in the walls, because we know that because this mold spore is only associated with decaying wood. So that is a pretty neat thing, I think, that the mold sampling offers.
I do appreciate you calling out Stachybotrys because we're very on board with that. We understand Stacky to be the toxic black mold, but there's a lot of mold testers and a lot of mold inspectors that will call out common molds to be the most dangerous. And so it was refreshing to hear you say Stachybotrys and not
Okay.
like an aspen or something.
Attempting to say it. So
But
yeah.
just going back to the basic home inspection, the whole industry, I mean, do you have to have some sort of background in general contracting to become a home inspector? Like, how is that industry regulated where you are?
Yeah, that's a good question. So yes, you have to be a licensed home inspector in Oregon and Washington. And you do not necessarily need to have a background in construction, although it is very helpful. And because in order to pass the test, it's quite a difficult test. But in order to pass that test, the kind of bare minimum, it does help to have a background. And the way the laws are written, basic, and they aren't always enforced this way, which kind of rubs me a little bit with, especially with the state of Oregon, the construction contractor board. But anytime somebody inspects more than one component in a building, you're supposed to be a licensed home inspector. So if somebody comes in and just inspects your plumbing, okay, you can be a plumber, you don't need to be a home inspector. But if you come in and inspect the plumbing and the electrical, you're supposed to be a licensed home inspector, okay? And the reason I say it rubs me is there are companies out there that do things like oil tank sweeps, sewer scopes, and radon testing. Now, those are 3 different components of a building, but the CCB is not enforcing the fact that they should be licensed home inspectors. And I think it's a problem, and it's something they should change, because what you have is a contractor who's there who does not get paid unless they have a big project. And so they come in and do the radon testing, sewer scope, and whatever, oil tank sweeper, they bundle these things, and then they find these problems, or they make these problems into bigger problems. And it's during a very stressful time during the home sale and everything. And that's the whole reason behind home inspectors having to be licensed. And we have certain restrictions, like we cannot work on any home that we've inspected within 1 year. And the idea being, it's a very stressful time. And even though I'm a licensed contractor, it's not ethical, I believe, and the people who wrote the law believe, for somebody to come and say, oh, you need a radon system installed and a new sewer line, and here's a bid for it. I can do it, today, or, got somebody around the corner. So that's why they say home inspectors should be the only ones doing it. And again, just kind of a rub on me, and the CCB is not enforcing it. And I think they're wrong. And I think it's a failing, which I would say also another failing, I do believe, that associated with homes is and are the regulations concerning mold exposure. And we get so many clients or potential clients who are like, I've got mold in my home, I think it's making me sick, and what do I do? And it's like, well, we can do an inspection, we can do sampling, things like that, but it's not like lead, it's not like asbestos, it's not like radon, where there are set levels of exposure that say, if you have so many mold spores present, it's dangerous. So each person has to prove on their own that this mold is making them sick. And it has happened. People have used our inspections for lawsuits and stuff like that, and have won, but it's a much higher bar. And it seems like for the protection of the general population, there should be set levels. There should be a certain amount of exposure where, just like asbestos, where it is assumed to cause problems if mold is present, because so many tenants may have issues and they can't fix the issues. They can't fix the moisture problems with the homes, and so they end up having to live with mold. They've got contracts and agreements that the landlords keep them there as well. And so that's another failing, I think, with the state and the federal government, is that we should have some set levels of mold exposure, where above that, it's a given, it's dangerous for people to live in.
We've had this conversation before about the regulation of toxic mold. And Eric's not here right now because he's out, but one thing that Eric always says is that regulation of the mold industry has the potential to cause more harm than it could help.
Hmm.
And I don't mean to come out to directly disagree with you, because I think that's like a very earnest and sincere and honest way that people want to help.
Mhm.
They want to establish a limit that we can't go past for safety, and they want it enforced for the resident safety. There's just a few things of how this plays out in real life that make that challenging, or do allow that regulation to essentially hurt someone who's been injured to the level that I've been injured with from toxic mold, or Alicia or Eric.
Mhm.
We have what is considered a permanent immune system injury. So we are essentially walking mold radars, where we can kind of tell if mold is hiding in a wall.
Mhm.
Now, let's have a situation where they set a safe limit of Stachybotrys. What if they set it at 1 spore is safe? 1 spore would still be too much for somebody like me.
Mhm.
If they set it at 0, it seems even trickier to enforce, because it's like, what if you can't find any spores in the air test? But what if you can find like the mycotoxins on another type of test?
Mhm.
So like maybe you can't find the colony and the spore's too heavy, so you can't test for it, but you could maybe have evidence of the mycotoxins. What would that do for the regulation? Let's say you have mycotoxin that's only produced by a trichothecene producing mold like Stachybotrys chaetomium, one of the really nasty ones. And those molds aren't found like in an air sample or a spore test, but maybe their mycotoxins are present, and maybe their mycotoxins are found, and maybe they're not found.
Mhm.
And so these are just some of the I feel like I
Yeah.
interjected with this whole thing about why this isn't possible, but I feel like you are a good person that would maybe think about that and say, well, hey, look, maybe this is how it could be done differently, or maybe you might have ideas about that and feedback and say something interesting that we can all learn from.
Yeah. And so with my thoughts, it basically comes from seeing homes that are filled with mold. So it's like we get a client who is maybe renting the home, and I think if I've got a mold problem, my landlord won't do anything. What do I do? And it's like basically right now the only thing you can do is sue them. That's the only thing. And my understanding, and even though there's mold everywhere, that's where I believe there should be consequences for bad landlords that are not keeping their properties habitable without somebody having to engage a lawyer and sue everybody, and that way. And yeah, I mean, how do you set the levels? I don't know. I'm not a
It
public
seems like
policy person. Yeah.
No, but I'm with you. I'm really with you on what you said, because what you identified back to me as a response was like, okay, so maybe it's not going to be helpful for the hypersensitized who are still reacting to 1 spore and that can't be found, but how many more people would it be helping who are maybe really low income and their landlords aren't doing basic upkeep, and it's just allowing mold to overflow inside
Mhm.
of an area?
Yeah. And so it is a tricky question. That's probably why they haven't figured it out, but it seems like they can do more, and
They
they should
definitely
do
could be
to
doing more
protect
than
people. Exactly.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Well, thinking about your industry, the mold industry, it seems like there's just a lot of failures within both. And, when you're hiring a mold inspector, you're not really understanding their background. At least for me, I was buying my first home. I didn't know what the heck I was looking for. I just said, "Hey, realtor, bring someone in and let it be done so we can move forward with the purchase here." Do you feel like it's important to hire someone who is highly trained? Like, I feel like that's just an important component to really understand what's going on in your house. Like having someone with the background of, building construction and whatever else. And it seems like that's what really makes your organization different from other companies, is that you guys actually have this extensive experience, because you're also, not only are you doing these inspections, but you're actually teaching people how to do better inspections than, I guess, what is currently offered on the market.
Yes. And I would say that it's super, super important to get, you know, a well-qualified inspector for, the home inspection. Now, if you do have like severe mold allergy and, reaction, that's where I would say, even above a home inspector, go to an expert mold person, with and don't rely just on the home inspector, because again, per state law, mold's not even a home inspector thing, really. Per state law, we try to do better than what's the minimum required. We try to offer the professional air sampling. It helps reduce the risk. But if you do have sensitivity already, I would say go to the experts, the mold experts. And the thing about home inspectors is they're not really supposed to be experts in anything. They're supposed to be generalists, that know a lot of stuff about a lot of different things. And we have to know, I mean, thousands of different systems, to inspect a house, because so many houses are different. But a home inspector is not going to be an expert on everything, an expert on mold, expert on radon, expert on, structural things like that. So if there is a severe sensitivity already, go to a qualified mold contractor. And that being said, as you guys may know, and kind of my feelings about it, the mold contracting business can be very predatory. I believe, and I've seen it, where you've got some great contractors who are very ethical and who take it very seriously and don't try to rip people off. And then there's contractors who don't do anything, throw some paint over whatever, mold is there, call it good, and they don't really fix anything. And so I do try to warn our clients that, mold is one of those very predatory areas that contractors can be really good or really bad. And so you want to research them, Better Business Bureau and all the reviews and everything too, to make sure that they're really going to do what they say they're going to do, and aren't potentially making the problem worse. Because you can have people who don't know what they're doing come in and, in quotes, remediate mold, and they end up spreading spores around even worse, in the home. So it is important to research the companies.
Sorry, Kaylee, your typing is super loud and we can
Oh my
hear it.
God.
Yeah,
I'm so
sorry.
sorry. I
Sorry,
forgot I
Charles.
wasn't muted.
Sorry, Charles.
That's okay.
I was like, whoa.
Yeah, so just very important to research any mold contractor extensively. But again, if there is that sensitivity that already, I would not rely just on a home inspector. Even our home inspectors, we're really good, but if there's that concern already, step it up to the expert mold contractors is what I would suggest. And I was listening to, I think it was your guys' very first podcast, and somebody had mold underneath a washing machine. Is that, and they found it, there was a plumbing supply line drip under the washing machine. There was a bunch of mold there. And that's kind of an example where a home inspector, because we're not allowed to pull the dishwashers out of the walls and check underneath them, things like that, because our client may not own the home yet, and so can't do like more invasive inspection. So that's like an example of why a home inspector, they've said mold's outside the scope of a home inspection because we can't pull all that stuff out, like a contractor can and would be allowed to do.
So then do inspectors, do they always make a point to identify evidence of water damage?
They should do that. And
can they say legally, I've noticed staining, this is evidence of a leak, this could be evidence of mold, you might want to have that looked into?
yes,
Is
should.
that within like the legal allowability?
Yeah, and what they suggest that home inspectors say is, apparent mold or microbial growth, because I think there's a fear with some home inspectors that they would get sued, because they said there was mold, and the only way you can know for sure if it's mold is by a laboratory test, and so you'll see most home inspectors will say, apparent mold observed. However, and this is one reason why we're trying to elevate the industry, there are some home inspectors that won't even comment on it. There'll be a big splotch of mold on the wall and they won't even mention it because mold is outside the scope of a home inspection. And for me, that's a bad home inspector. If there's something that's visually accessible and they're not commenting on it, I think that's terrible. And
so they're technically following the law,
mm-hmm.
but it's a loophole that essentially harms the health of the consumer and the home occupant.
It can, for sure. Yep.
Maybe that's something that we could fill in the void.
Yeah.
And get loud on talking about to kind of shame the industry into some decency.
Yeah. Yeah. And in Oregon and Washington, one easy change for home inspectors would be to say any visual indications of apparent mold or something should be noted in the report, to change the law to say, hey, it's not, because again, I don't think it would be fair to say for the home inspector, if mold was found underneath the dishwasher where it wasn't visually accessible, I don't think that's fair to hold them to that. But
right.
If mold is on a wall and it's totally visible during the inspection, I think they should be commenting on it. And maybe that's where some regulations could be changed.
So slightly, there's also the liability of the inspector, where they don't really want to be liable for not finding something if it's somewhere where they didn't look hard enough or something, because not every inspector is pulling out a dishwasher. I mean, inspectors don't do that when you buy a house.
They would get in trouble with the home seller if they did that a lot,
Okay.
for sure, to pull it out. Though one thing to note though is for the home inspector, there are, and this is unfortunate and something we don't partake in at all, but some home inspectors won't call out issues like that, like even mold that's visible, because they don't want to sink the deal. Because it's a dirty little secret is that a lot of home inspectors get referrals from real estate agents. Like,
Yeah.
Alicia mentioned, I just used that home inspector my agent suggested. So what happens is that those home inspectors don't want to sink that deal. Mold is scary, so they may not call it out. And if they do call it out, that agent gets mad and never uses them again, and
absolutely. We actually used our own home inspector for that exact reason.
Yep.
And our realtor was personally offended that we didn't use her referred person. And I'm thinking, look, I know how this game works and I'm not playing it with you. Like, I'm absolutely finding my own inspector.
Yep. That's a really, really smart idea. And you're just, because then they're not beholden. And, legally, home inspectors are not supposed to modify their results or the report to make an agent happy, but I know it happens.
But they
And
could
that's,
ignore some stuff, or they could
yep,
not find some stuff, or
yep,
they could continuously not mention that a damp problem is a huge red flag. And that way they could get a lot of real estate deals to go through where there could have been a hiccup, the
yep,
sales canceled, or a repair has to happen if this is brought up.
yep, exactly. And it's unfortunate. I think it is a good idea to research home inspectors, significantly. Look at those reviews. And that's the one thing that's kind of nice about our current market is that, um, you know, an inspector, if they were to do something that be soft on a house just to get a sale and keep the agent happy, eventually it's going to come around and bite them, and somebody's going to be mad and write a review. And so that's where I think it's kind of weeding some of that out, but we still have a ways to go for sure.
Yeah, and also it can be delayed by people not putting two and two together.
Yep.
It's one thing to even find mold in your house, and then to connect it with your illness, and then to suspect your realtor and your inspector just let it slide. Those are a lot of really big eye-opening realizations that don't all happen for people.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I got screwed over with that being, a person that was well and didn't know anything about mold and didn't know anything about throwing ourselves into the gauntlet. And it's like there's so much stuff that I had to learn after the fact, after I got sick, after we got screwed over. And now I'm like, whoa, it really opened up my eyes to this whole industry and just how conniving people can be, from the realtors to the remediators to the
It's
testers, the
crazy.
inspectors. Like, who's protecting the consumer? It's like,
Yeah.
where are the
You really,
laws
that's the
plugging up
craziest
these
part,
loopholes?
Alicia. Like, you really think people, normal business people, are just normal, good-hearted people with integrity, and then you like get thrown into the snake pit, and you're like, you're all in here trying to bite me?
Yep.
You guys had uniforms on. Are you joking? Like,
Yep.
it's so, Alicia, exactly what you said, conniving.
Absolutely. And that's why organizations like ours form, through these tragedies, and these tragedies really turn into these situations where we want to look out for people. We want to help people. And we don't want them to go down the same roads that we went down, and try to reduce suffering as much as we can. And it's so awesome that you guys decided to go in the nonprofit like realm.
Mhm.
Like, explain that. Like, how did all that come about? Because we've started a nonprofit, and we're just like, it's just like so much to like get through, and to like meet all these deadlines and these requirements. And it's just like, we should have just been for profit. Like, at this point, it's just like insane. So
Yeah.
the fact that you guys have Google as a sponsor, Microsoft as a sponsor, like you're going through the motions. And like, how many people have you been able to serve just through your efforts of this organization?
It's thousands, per year, with big house purchases and things. So, and as you mentioned, running a nonprofit is brutal. It's very difficult. I've run both for-profits and nonprofits, and it's twice the paperwork, and twice the headaches running the nonprofit. You do have some benefits where you can get, some grant support and stuff like that, but it is a big deal and a lot of work. And but it's, important work. With us, I believe we're the only nonprofit home inspection company like nationwide. I couldn't find one at all. It makes sense to me though. We have our sliding scale and we have free services where we partnered with the Oregon Health Authority. And so we are giving out free radon tests in Oregon and Washington. And, we have our trade school and things like that. So, we've got all that, but at the same time, even regular home inspection company, it is a great public service if you're doing it right, and you're not colluding with real estate agents, and you're trying to do the best job possible. And that's something we try to teach our students, is that they can be a for-profit and have a lot less paperwork and everything, but you can still be helping people out without trying to take advantage of everything and trying to make every buck you can off of somebody by minimizing potential defects. So in terms of starting up the nonprofit, I have got a background in nonprofit management. My master's degree is in nonprofit management, and I've started up a couple of other nonprofits up in Portland area. The Ethos Music Center, I had started that up right after grad school, and then down in West Lynn area, I was hired to start up the Youth Music Project, and that was one of the Columbia Sportswear family members hired me for starting that up. So I've done a ton of nonprofit work over the years, but when we had that personal tragedy where my mom was exposed to asbestos and got mesothelioma, then I'm like, this is something I can do. Music's one thing, it's very important for kids. We've had budget cuts and everything, but you're talking life and death with some of these things that impact the home and impact people living there. And things like mold, it can be life changing to have that sensitivity. And so it was something that I thought, this is a great way to give back to the community, to help everybody have their own safe housing. And it's not really, as well as I kind of mentioned at the beginning, it's not just the safety, but it's also the financial aspect. Because if you find out, you purchase a home and, oh, looks good, use the home inspector my real estate agent suggested, and then you move in and it turns out to be a money pit, that can be devastating for families as well. It could be, you've got major structural issues or things like that. So and also we also try to focus on some environmental things and things people can do better with their homes, including, insulation's a very easy thing to make it more environmentally friendly. And we try to add those aspects to our reports as well.
Did you say that you studied nonprofit in college? Like there's a whole degree on learning how to run a nonprofit?
Yep. Yeah.
What's the name of that field?
So mine was a master's in public policy, and was at Harvard University and the
Public
Kennedy.
policy?
Yeah, master's in public policy. So
I'm like, I went to school for the wrong thing.
yeah.
I had to do the double take on that one.
Yeah. So I studied, it was business and government with a focus on nonprofit management. And
so you maybe didn't get as blindsided by some of the requirements as we did.
no, but it's brutal. It's hard.
It is.
It's hard work. And, people don't necessarily understand that when looking. They think, oh, nonprofits, and they don't even understand too that like you can have paid employees, and they're like, well, why are you charging for a home inspection if you're nonprofit? It's like, well, you got to keep the lights on, and
we charge for consults for people who need our expertise with discerning things in the industry, and we get the same flack. Like, how dare you not offer everything you do for free? And it's like, who do you think is funding this work, you guys? Like, we're funding it ourselves. Like,
yeah. No, it takes a lot of work. And with every nonprofit I've started, I have tried to implement what's called a fee for service basis. And the idea being, if you can offer this service and it's valuable, people will pay for it. And the key thing, though, is making it accessible to everybody, but with the sliding scale. So there's no reason if somebody can afford to pay for it that they shouldn't pay for it, because it is a valuable service, and you can use that revenue then to help support people who can't afford it, and then the other thing is with the grant support, that can come. You can, find grants to support the efforts. But what I would suggest not doing is you want to never rely on them and only use it to expand and to pay for like capital. So if you're going to expand and do a new program, then use the grant support just for that, because it is fleeting. You may get support from, a foundation 1 year or 2 years, but after a while, they're going to move on to something else, so you never want to rely on foundation support for long-term support, in my opinion, just to expand and to grow the programs.
I appreciate that little tidbit of advice more than you know, because we have had to take a serious look at how we are funding the nonprofit, and we're primarily doing like memberships, services, and sponsorships that are reoccurring for that exact reason. We know that when and if we do get a grant, it's not going to be something that we can rely on forever.
Yep. Yeah.
So I appreciate that confirmation as someone who's much more experienced in this than we are, because it makes me feel like I'm going on the right direction. And also, Charles, it's been such a pleasure speaking with you. You have been one of the most down-to-earth, pleasurable guests that we've had on our show. And it's really clear that you're on the right side of this fight. And so it's a pleasure to meet you. And thank you so much for coming on our podcast today.
Well, thank you very much for having me. I really appreciate it.
Thanks everyone for listening. We'll see you guys next time. You can go ahead and stop recording if you'd like, Keely, or we can keep talking.